Hello, everyone!
Hello,
everybody!
Hi, everyone!
Hey.
We miss you all. Everybody that comes to the PoMo Public Library, we miss all of you. And we miss our staff in chats, talking and peeking and spying on what books people are reading. So we decided to have this book chat so we can find out what everybody is reading and also share that with you. So we are going to start with Corinne.
Hello. So the book I chose to present is The Yellow Bird Sings by Jennifer Roessner. We just got a brand new copy in before the library closed. I think there's an audio book on order, but there's also an ebook I noticed that's just been added to the collection and is available now. This book I thought was exquisite. It was one of my favorite all-time reads. The writing is absolutely beautiful, as is the story. So historical fiction, it's set in Poland in World War II, and it tells the story of a Jewish lady, Rosa, and her 5-year-old daughter, Shira, who are forced to flee their home, and they hide out in the loft of a neighbor's barn. They have to be completely quiet because obviously they don't want to be discovered. So Rosa starts telling her daughter stories about a yellow bird. And the writing is so amazing. This imaginary world that this little girl is taken into that keeps her quiet, that lets her live through these days and hours of solitude is amazing. And behind that, this little girl's actually a musical prodigy. So the mom starts talking to her about music as well. Then the problem is, because this girl is a prodigy, the songs and rhythms start going through her brain into her imagination, and she starts slowly tapping out beats and stuff. So she begins to make noise. Her mother gets to the point where she can't control the music that's flowing through this girl's body and the tapping and the humming. So the mom is forced to make the choice of how does she go on to protect her daughter's life and her own life. Absolutely amazing, highly recommend it. The writing is just unbelievable. It reminds me of, if you like Janie Chang's writing style or Gail Tsukiyama, absolutely beautiful. So highly recommend it. Go run now and grab the ebook copy. That's it. Miss you all.
Thank you, Corinne. And I know Corinne reads a lot of, I would say, literary fiction and historical fiction, probably. Yeah. So if you are looking for more suggestions, go find Corinne. She is your person. All right. Okay. Maybe I think we're gonna hear from Fiona and see what she is reading.
Right. Hi, everybody. So I am reading. Oh, getting a lot of glare. Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq, and she is an Inuk throat singer from Nunavut, if you haven't heard of her before. And this is, it's technically an autobiographical, but it blends a lot of poetry, fiction, and myth. I'm about 100 pages in, and it's not too big of a book, so I'm not finished yet. But I'm really loving it and sort of enjoying it in small bites, because it's very moving and upsetting and poetic. So it's nice to just sort of savor like a chapter that's, 2 or 3 pages, and then come back to it the next day. So it's really about the singer's life growing up in Nunavut, in the cold, and going through school, friendships, bullying, just sort of her everyday life, but it's really mixed in with mythology, and it's hard to tell when something is true or when she's sort of representing something with imagery. So you kind of have to parse through and get a picture of her life for yourself based on sort of like parsing through the myth and what's actually in there and what she's trying to say. So it's really unique and quite beautiful. I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm a big fan of autobiography, so it's why I picked it up, but it kind of brings a lot more than that. So if you like poetry as well, I would suggest it.
Great, thank you, Fiona. All right, who would like to go next? All right, Liz. Okay, we're gonna hear from Liz.
I wanted to book today is called This Is How You Win the Time War, and it's by Amal El-Mutar and Max Gladstone. So 2 authors writing this book in conjunction with each other. So the premise of the story is that there's 2 rival agents, kind of think spies, I guess, would be the closest thing in this world. And these 2 agents travel through space and time. Now they're with 2 different factions. One character is named Red, and she works for the agency, which is a very technologically centered life form. And the other character is Blue, who is with Garden. And they're life forms who are embedded in organic matter all around us. So these 2 agents travel through space and time, each attempting to sabotage the other's faction. And somehow, through mutual respect and also a little bit of, I guess, ribbing of each other, they start a correspondence. Now, at first, it's highly professional because these 2 individuals are doing jobs that are highly specialized, and as a result, they're very lonely during their work. So through mutual respect, their correspondence takes a turn, where they develop more of an emotional relationship, where they feel like they've found somebody else out there in this world who finally understands them and what they go through and what they're doing. So what I found so amazing about this book was that even though it was written by 2 different authors, each of them taking a voice of either Blue or Red, and writing these chapters and writing the letters, I felt that it was amazing how these 2 could come together remotely and create a story that was so transcendent and beautifully written. Now, I don't read a lot of science fiction. I read even less spy fiction, and I read even less romance. But I found that this book had all of these elements in it, and I absolutely loved it. I could not put it down, and I felt that the relationship between the 2 characters, even though we don't really know anything about them other than their jobs and what they project in the letters to each other, I just felt like that didn't matter to me. I didn't care what they looked like. I didn't care how they sounded. I didn't even really get too hung up on the details about this sci-fi world that they were part of. I just found that their words to each other were so lyrical and so beautiful that I just had to go out and buy this book for my own copy, for my own personal library, which those at the library know I almost never do. And I also can't wait to reread this book one day, or perhaps even listen to the audiobook. So you can check this out, the ebook version or the audiobook version on Overdrive.
Thank you, Liz. That was great. Highly recommended because, like she said, she never go buy books. So like she went out like almost right away. So we know she loves it a lot. All right, Miss Corinne, would you like to tell us about your book?
Yes, I would, Virginia. So when Melissa's dad asks her to go and clean out her grandmother's house after her passing, Melissa doesn't really think too much of it. She grabs her very, very dim coonhound named Bongo, who I think is my favorite character in literature of all time. Just a very, very simple dog. She jumps into her pickup truck and takes the long drive to her grandmother's house in northern North Carolina, in this very, very rural, forested part of the world. And she hasn't been to her grandmother's place in a really long time. Her grandmother was, as the people in the town say, not a nice lady. She was snippy and she was cruel and she was mean to the marrow of her bones. So Melissa didn't like to visit her. The only bright spot in the visits that she did when she was a kid was that she saw her step grandfather, who showed her a little bit of kindness. And what her father has neglected to tell Melissa before she arrives is that in her twilight years, her grandmother became a hoarder. So she steps into this dilapidated, out of the way North Carolina home, and she finds it suffocating with old newspapers and old clothes and rotting food. And what turns into what was supposed to be a very simple task turns into this monumental thing. But as she's digging through all of this detritus from her grandmother's life, she finds a notebook. And it's a notebook written by her step-grandfather, who passed away long ago. And what she thinks is going to be a nice little diary of an old man's ramblings in the garden is actually an unhinged rambling of a terrified man trying to escape what he describes as the Twisted Ones. And these creatures torment his every waking and sleeping hour. And this writing terrifies Melissa, because the longer that she stays in this house, she begins to notice strange things. In the forest at night, she sees creatures contorted in horrible ways, dragging themselves through the trees. And she hears knockings at the door at night. And she's overcome with a horrible compulsion to twist herself in the shapes of the Twisted Ones. So this is billed as a horror book, but I actually found it just like a little spooky, and a little bit funny and a little bit of a fairy tale. It's written by T. Kingfisher, who also writes children's books under Ursula Verdon. So she does the Hamster Princess books, which is why I picked this up. But if you're looking for something that is a little bit fairy tale, a little bit spooky, and a book that Virginia is guaranteed to hate, then you'll want to pick up The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher.
Yes, thank you for that endorsement, Corinne. You'll discover Corinne and I read completely different things. That's why we can share an office and we don't fight, because she gets all the books, she gets excited about those ones, I get excited about these ones. We can share, right? So it's all
never
good.
The twain shall meet.
That's right. Yeah, we'll never fight over a book. All right, so Lynn, tell us about your book.
So the book that I have is called Out of Darkness, Shining Light by Tina Kappa. And she's an author that lives in Zimbabwe. So the book does take place in Africa. And basically it's about Dr. David Livingstone, who I'm sure most of you have all heard of. He's a Scottish physician, explorer in Africa, missionary, trying to abolish slavery down there, convert the Africans to Christianity and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, it is a fiction book, okay? And it starts out, rather than telling the story about Dr. Livingstone's life, the story starts out with his death. And then it's all leading up to what they do with his body after he has died. So you have to realize that the Africans there were very superstitious, had a lot of things going on. And for example, when Dr. Livingstone was bathing himself in the river, and they saw that, oh my God, his whole body is white, all the parts of it, including his brains, because he was washing his hair, and they saw the white suds and the brains came out, and then all of a sudden the brains went back in and disappeared, but every part of him was white. So, and of course, the white suds were the soap that he used. But anyway, a lot of superstition. So when the story starts out, like I say, with his death, there's superstition around spirits. If spirits aren't buried where they're from, then they will haunt and travel around, abroad. And so they were very, very fearful of this. So they decided that what they were going to do is bring his body home. And his actual resting place is in Westminster Abbey in England. So the story is in two parts. The first half is narrated by his cook, Halima, and the second half is narrated by Jacob, who was his attendant. I've just started on Jacob's half. I'm that way through. So he was his attendant. And the whole story is about their 1,500-mile journey from Zambia out to the coast so that his body can be brought home. And the only part that they left in Africa was his heart. And they actually buried it right where he died, and they buried it below the tree. And there's a mark on the tree in Africa where he is buried. And so it's just a really interesting perspective because it's talks all about that journey and what they all go through. So anyway, I would recommend it. It's not something that I normally read, but it was a really quick grab just before the library closed, and it was in my stash. And I went, okay, get out of your comfort zone. And I'm really enjoying it, and I'm actually going to finish it. It's that good. So that's my story.
Thank you, Lynn. All right, I think Eileen would like to talk about her book, something quite different, I believe.
Yes, I'm the romance fan of the library, so I chose On Mystic Lake by Kristen Hanna as my book to talk about today. It's actually the third book that I've read this week, so I'm quite a prolific reader. This book starts out, the woman, she's been married for 20 years. She's got a 17-year-old daughter. Her husband's a high-flying lawyer in LA. He, makes lots of money, drives a Ferrari. She lives the ideal California life with a beautiful beach house. Money's no object. Everything that she wants, she has. She's always perfectly dressed. But she takes her daughter to the airport. Her daughter's doing a year of term in London. And on the drive back, her husband pulls into the driveway and says, I want a divorce. Our marriage is over. I'm running off with a 28-year-old colleague. So she's absolutely devastated. This perfect life, this perfect family that she thought she had is disappeared in an instant. Her daughter's not home. Her husband's left her. So she wallows in misery for a while. And must admit, that was first 3 chapters were a bit of a hard read. She decides then to go home to see her dad, who lives in the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. So she goes home and wallows in misery for a little bit longer. But then she gets introduced to this little girl. Her mom, who happened to be Annie Coldwater, is the main character. So Annie's best friend in high school was Kathy, and Kathy has died by suicide. So her little daughter, Izzy, is having a very difficult time coping. So Annie kind of agrees to look after this little girl while the dad, Nick, who is also a high school friend, tries to get a grip with his life. He's also traumatized by his wife's death. So Annie looks after Lizzie during the day. Izzy is having a terrible time. She thinks she's actually disappearing. She's taken to wearing a black glove on one hand because she thinks her whole hand has disappeared. But Annie kind of brings her back to life. She just talks constantly to her. She becomes a good friend. She tries to bring Nick back from the edge of the abyss because he's become an alcoholic. And she's still coping with the death of her marriage too. And all these 3 lost souls kind of bond together and make a family. And then all of a sudden, the husband, Blake, the rich lawyer in LA, wants her back because he realizes that she made his life perfect, even though he claims to have an emotional attachment to her, but really he's just liking the perfect life that she gave him. So she goes back, she discovers, well, the big secret at the end is she discovers she's pregnant with Blake's child. So she's struggling whether she wants to keep her life with Nick and Izzy in Washington or go back to LA and have this perfect lifestyle with a husband who likes her but doesn't really emotionally connect with her or her daughter. So long story short, it does have a happy ending, and that's why I read romance, because you're guaranteed to have a happy ending. And especially during these uncertain times, I find the happy ending very comforting. It's a good book if you want a happy ending, if you like very character-driven stories. I was surprised. It was actually written in 1999, and writing has changed quite a bit. So there was quite a few jarring, all of a sudden you're in a different point of view or you're in a different place right within the chapter, which I found a little bit hard to read first of all, but then you kind of get used to the writing style. So, but it's a really good book. The characters are excellently written. It takes place in Washington State, talks a lot about rain, so we can all relate to that.
Thank you, Eileen. I commend you for reading, what is it, your third book already this week? Like, that's amazing, because I can't even finish one these days. Slightly hard. All right, Leanne.
Hello. Okay, so I just started reading this book a couple days ago. It's called Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. It's a very different kind of book than I usually read, and I'm blaming my pandemic mush brain, because when I tend to pick up a book that I would normally read, I can't concentrate on anything. And this book struck me as just a little bit weird, and weird enough that it's making me stay with the story. So the premise of this one is we have two characters. They're just starting out a new semester at a private all-girls school. We have Madison, who is the wealthy legacy child. She gets to come in with her family behind her, and she takes her rightful place in this institution as the person that belongs. And then we have Lillian, who is a scholarship student from the wrong side of the tracks. Her mom is sketchy and has some addiction issues and things like that. So it's a bit of a familiar story in that you've got the bright light child and then the dark mystery moody child. And so they are roommates in their dorm. And as the story progresses and their friendship grows, they form this weird friendship and this unique bond. And there's this little bit of a scandal that happens that gets Lillian removed from the school. I'm not really spoiling anything, but the golden child develops a bit of a drug habit and she gets busted. And so her rich dad invites the troubled Lillian and her mother to a diner. And he says, listen, my daughter has a very, very bright future in front of her, and this scandal could shake that to the very core. So what I propose is if I write you a check so that you take the fall, and the headmistress will likely go much more lenient on you, we will be able to, her future will be saved. You will be okay because we take pity on people like you. And sketchy mom says, sure, I'll take your money. And it turns out Lillian gets expelled. So that's how that friendship sort of ends for a while, until one day, out of the blue, Lillian gets a letter from Madison, and they're now adults and leading very different lives. Madison is now married to a senator and living in the mansion, and she misses her friend. Can you please come to see me? I need your help, and I can't do this without you. So the car shows up and whisks her off to the big house on the hill, and there is a reunion, and they're so happy to see each other. And Madison says, hey friend, I need your help. You know me well, and I can't do this without you. My husband, my senator husband, has children with a previous wife, and the kids, these twins, have been living with the ex-wife for this entire time, and I don't really know much about them and how to handle them. I'm just used to living this life, and I don't know how to manage kids. And if you could do me this favor, I would be so grateful. Could you please be the governess for my senator's twin children? You know, I heard you have a rough life and you don't, and this would be a chance for me to make it up to you. You could live with us in this mansion, in this grand lifestyle. You stay right now. You don't even have to go home and pack your bag, and we'll buy you new clothes. We'll give you a fancy house. Could you please look after these kids? I'm sure they're fine. And she says, sure, I'll do it. And she says, great news. One little thing though. Something about these twins is a little odd. So it turns out when they get to be very agitated, they literally burst into flames. And I'm at the point of the book now. They've taken her on the tour. They have shown Lillian, this is the house we built for you to look after these kids. It's all it looks like it's described as looking like a gymboree inside. But in the pantry where there would be food, there's a stockpile of fire extinguishers. There's a very elaborate system of sprinklers on the ceiling, all in preparation for these children who, when they get a little too mad, actually explode into flames. And living with a 10 and 11-year-old right now who are way off their schedule, away from their friends, living with mom and dad at home, I kind of feel like my kids are on the brink of exploding at any moment, as maybe are some of your children. I'm looking at my ceiling thinking we could do with some sprinklers. If nothing else, is just a distraction, or a forced shower every once in a while. So not at all the kind of book I usually read. I cannot give you a read alike because I don't know. But when I get to the end, so far so good. I'm really, it's got my attention enough these days, which is in short supply. So it is called Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. And I love this cover. That's actually what got me in Goodreads. So it is available on Goodreads. I have it out right now, and I promise to return it as soon as I'm done. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Leanne. The whole time I was listening to Leanne, I'm like, is she going to tell them about the exploding kids? Is she going to say about the exploding kids? Because I wasn't sure whether she's going to tell them or not. I wasn't sure how far into the book that they actually exploded. So anyway, so we have Annette. I don't know if anything exploded in her book.
Fortunately not, no. Okay, so when I'm not reading really fluffy, amusing stuff, which is definitely on the top of my list these days because we all need fluffy and amusing, I like to read a lot of history, through current events, things that get you thinking about how things are connected and interconnected. I'm not really into history in terms of how things line up and the dates and all the facts and figures so much as how they tell a story and how they make you ask other questions. So I picked up this book last year. It's Sapiens. It's a brief history of humankind. It's by Yuval Harari, who has a PhD in history, world history from Oxford University. He wrote this a few years ago and a couple of follow-ups since. So I'm actually rereading it as a prelude of getting into some of his follow-ups. The book is, as it sort of says, it's a brief history of humankind. It sort of talks about the normal things you'd think of. The development of, from hunter-gatherers to cognitive, agricultural, scientific, industrial revolutions, all that sort of kind of boring stuff you're thinking, okay, whatever. But he throws in a few twists, which were really interesting to think about. He talks about, for example, the development of language is not only allowing us to express really abstract ideas, but more importantly, it allowed us to develop gossip, which he sort of goes on about how is one of the most important things, important ways we have of communicating information in groups. I never really thought of gossip. You always think of gossip as being a really negative thing, but he puts quite a positive spin on it. He talks about the agricultural revolution and how we didn't domesticate wheat and animals, they domesticated us. And that it was possibly one of the biggest frauds on the planet, which is kind of a different way of we normally would think of things. One of the really, I think, more controversial ideas he has for some people would be that political and economic systems are actually just other forms of religions, which you're kind of going, what? But he puts forth kind of an interesting argument, and that also that all of our money systems or legal systems or ideas about human rights are really all based on myths. We wouldn't go along with them, which is kind of how we discuss in later books. Same people for a long time, and you're kind of thinking, okay, now what? We need something new to talk about. It'd probably be a really good one, I think, if you have other people that could read it and you could do an online conversation, because it does interest or bring up some really interesting big questions. Definitely a lot of people aren't going to agree with everything in the book. Even some of the academics are saying, wait a sec, hold on, this isn't quite how, this maybe should be interpreted. But he does ask a lot of really interesting questions and make you look at things in a really different way, which I think is sometimes really helpful, because especially in these times when things that we've all really taken for granted that, well, this is just always the way it's going to be. This is always the way it's going to, go in the future. And then something throws and it's like, oh, we didn't see this one coming. So I found it kind of interesting for that. He talks about our role in the environment, how that's changed. He talks about how much of our behavior now and in the future is based on our hunter-gatherer DNA, which a lot of people may or may not agree with. And he talks about our role as an individual and sort of where we're going in the future, especially with, in his later book, Artificial Intelligence, which is the next one, which if you're interested, is Amadeus, this one here. And he has another one, 21 Questions for the 21st Century. All of them are available ebook audio, I believe, on our system. Certainly widely available if you want to purchase. So just kind of really interesting conversation starters, which I think we all are desperately looking for now, sitting around the dinner table. So hope you enjoy.
Thank you. And that sounds like we need to get Annette to host a book club.
No.
All right, Heather, I'm going to save you for the last, because yours is going to be awesome. Okay. So the book that I'm reading right now is called A Memory Called Empire by Katie Martin. I'm halfway through the book right now, and I'm reading this because I love political intrigue. That's like my favorite thing about Game of Thrones. It's not the dragons. I could care less about the dragons. It's all about the political intrigues, the secrets, the lies, the conspiracies, the like backroom door deals and all the like betrayals and all that. That's usually my favorite thing. And so this one here has all of that and more. Is about the story is about Mahit, who is a newly appointed ambassador from her home country to the empire. Now the empire, as you can tell from the name, has been like slowly extending their reach and trying to take over all the lands and all the places around and making it bigger and bigger and stronger. And so far, her home country has been able to like fend off the empire. They haven't, they're still independent. So like Lisa, so Mahit's job as an ambassador, the most important thing that she can do is to keep it that way, make sure that they can stay independent. And Mahit is really excited about her new job because like she can now experience firsthand a culture that she has always studied. She studied for years and she loved the language and she admired, even though like empire is kind of evil, they might take you over, but like she loved it. So she really excited about her new job. But of course, she didn't know what she's getting herself into, because the minute she landed, she was met by a liaison who's supposed to help her orient her to her new country. And they took her to the morgue. And she found out why they needed a new ambassador so urgently is because her predecessor, Yaskanda, is dead. They told her it is food poisoning or food allergies, but she looked at it, she was like, yeah, I don't think this is food allergies, it looks like poison. So she's now have to figure out, well, why someone want to poison him? What was he doing? Are they going to come after me as an ambassador? So she decided that, well, maybe I'll go meet with his liaison, and maybe like he can tell me what he was doing before he died, like what was he involved in, right? And so he managed to set up a meeting with them, and at the meeting, like a bomb went off, and then like now he's killed. So she's like, what is happening? And then she was like, well, like they say, oh, well, for your safety, we're going to have to move you. We're going to relocate you and we're going to put you under house arrest. So now she's stuck in a house. Every single thing that she does is being monitored. Every message that she sent out is being monitored. And so so she's stuck. And then at her first political meet and greets, where it's a poetry contest, because poetry is huge in the empire. Even the emperor is there to like watch this contest. And she found out, just trying to like figure out like what is actually happening, what's the political climate like here. And she found out that the emperor is kind of getting old. And so there's some succession plans in place, and there are 3 candidates for the future emperor. And they all kind of course, vying for position. And one of them approached her and said, well, I'm really sorry that your Skander is dead. And because he's dead, the deal is off. And she's like, what deal? Like, she has no idea. And so her plan was all about like, well, keeping, maybe if I keep a low profile, the empire would just like bypass my country and not like invade it or attack it. But clearly, Iskander is not the type to keep a low profile. So he's involved in like a lot of things, and she has like no idea what's happening. And so don't know whether she's going to be able to survive, all the political maneuvering and outmaneuver all of them. And yes, this is a science fiction. I'd save it to the last, because if I say that first, I know everybody will be like, just, tune out. But I think it's the type of science fiction that I really love, because it's all about like the people, rather than like about the hard science, which is not the type that I read because I can't deal with it. It's all about the people. And this one's all about like I said, the political intrigue. So it's not about like spaceships and stuff, even though they exist. And there is a secret technology that Mahit and her people had that might play into this. So if you want to find out, this is A Memory Called Empire by Katie Martin, and it is available on ebook and also on audiobook, and recently been nominated for the Hugo Award. All right, and last but not least is Heather.
The book that I just finished reading is My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. It is her first book, and it is a thriller. The story is told from the perspective of the husband, and we never find out what his name is, but we do know that he's like a charming tennis player and teacher, and he's married to a beautiful real estate agent, and they're moderately successful, but not as successful as they'd really like to be. Everything in their life is going okay until one day the wife, Maleficent's sister, comes back into her life, and she always said that she's very violent and she's very threatening. And so he comes home and he sees the sisters in the living room, and he sees Holly, the sister, moving towards his wife. And so in a rash, brave decision, he murders her. So they get rid of the body and everything's fine. They go on their life day to day until one day someone shows up their door, and it's someone who's looking for Holly. So he panics, calls his wife comes home, and this time she's the hero, and she murders this new intruder. So they murder this new person, get rid of them, that's 2 of them gone. But then they realize something about each other as a couple, is that they really enjoy murdering people. And it really reinvigorates their relationship, and they start to like think about, this is better than, having a nice house or children or a job. So they decide to pursue this as a full-time activity. And so they start stalking and murdering women throughout the community. So their plan to get away with all of this is they basically bring back a local serial killer who's been put away for a long time named Owen. And so the news is really clamoring onto this. They try to copycat the murders the way that Owen had been doing them. And everything is going great. They're super happy until it's not going great anymore. And they find out that Owen is actually dead. So at this point, everything starts to unravel a little bit as they're trying to navigate how to not be charged for multiple murders. Their family's starting to fall apart. Everything's starting to fall apart. And at this point, it turns into a little bit of a mystery. So it was not the best book I've ever read, but it was a good book. And if you are looking for a book that is a little bit murdery or spousal murdery at this point, this might be a good option for you. It is available on Overdrive as an ebook and as an audiobook, so you can check it out there.
Thank you, Heather. We're always here for a murdery book. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And we hope that we can do this again soon. And maybe we could involve some of our patrons, because I know they're big readers and they definitely have books to suggest to us. So thank you, everyone. We hope to see you all soon.
Bye.